Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say once again, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey, the UK aerospace engineer who has taken Whisper technology, worked with it, and perfected it as a tracking tool of aircraft, and has found a new location for MH370. Welcome, Richard.
And thank you, and good afternoon to you, Jeffrey.
Now, Richard, you've got an update on 7806 for us, and you've also got something on 8602, I believe.
Yeah, Armada 7806 is, as we mentioned, heading back to Singapore. It is now uh, 2 days out and just about to go through the Sunda Strait. We're showing a screenshot of its progress, uh, and it's apparently avoiding the weather, which is turning in the southern Indian Ocean. Although when I look at the weather, it seems to be holding and just as good or bad as it has been previously. And it apparently has other unavoidable appointments to and projects for the Armada 7806. So we'll see where it goes next. On Armada 8602, that's currently doing sea trials off the coast of Vietnam. So the second Armada 86 class ship has been launched and undergoing sea trials. So Ocean Infinity will soon have further Armada 86 class ships at their disposal, and we look forward to further launches in the near future.
Yes, they're certainly building up an amazing fleet. So this Armada class of theirs. Yeah, watch this space. Now, you won't believe this, Richard, but there are still people questioning you. Um, uh, Jeff
Well,
Smith dash YK1XB says, were you really a NASA engineer?
Jeff, no, I wasn't a NASA engineer in the sense that I worked for NASA. I worked for ESA, the European Space Agency, and I worked at a company called ANO Space Technology. ANO was the prime contractor for NASA and ESA on a project called Space Lab. You will remember that NASA developed the space shuttle, and the first manned space program jointly between NASA and ESA was a program with Space Lab being carried by the space shuttle into orbit in 1983. So I worked for 5 years for Erno Space Technology in Bremen on the Space Lab project, designing the Space Lab, building equipment to be able to integrate and test a Space Lab. I have several books which you can't buy in a bookshop, which were given to people working on the Space Lab project, and uh, and that's my answer to your question, Jeff Smith.
Now, Axel Hill 748 has got a long question, so I'm going to, or a long statement. I'm going to read it if you don't mind, viewers. So again, Jeff Wise might be onto something after all. He made claims about the resume. Richard refuses to engage of so-called personal attacks. However, call it however you want, but there are claims that either are true and or false. If those are the utter lies, then it would be super easy to disprove them by providing a variable resume with the contact details of those who can confirm that those are true. It is that simple. Instead, what's happening here. It is a very disheartening and dishonest to see my website with my CV. That CV does not contain any verifiable details at all. It's a little bit jumbled there, but I think you get the gist of it. He doesn't believe you.
Yeah, that much I got. Uh, Axel, it wasn't me who put my CV on my website. It was Jeff Wise who put my CV on his website. But that's neither here nor there. The Jeff Wise episode came out recently, now 6 days ago, um, on the 29th of March. I saw that episode. On the 30th of March, the next day, I wrote a 12-page paper because, as you say, it is super easy to give all the details which are verifiable from my CV. So there's a link to that 12-page document below, which you obviously didn't see when we first announced it 5 days ago. And there are a number of documents that are photographed in that, which are not in the public domain. So I couldn't have just in one day gone through the internet, found a bunch of stuff, and put it together to try and prove that I worked on the Space Lab project, for example. For 5 years, or I worked on avionic systems for another 4 years. I also worked for a total of 20 years on different military projects, some of which are still classified and I'm actually not allowed to talk about. But I do talk about a whole bunch of projects that I am able to talk about. So please go and have a look at those 12 pages that we published on the 30th, and it might answer your question.
Well said. So let's move on. Veritas 256 asks, while Richard Godfrey's Whisper technology has been able to track that three US naval planes that went down the Indian Ocean within 24 hours, the question should be asked is what could be the reason for the US Navy to fly there within 24 hours prior to the official search?
Yeah, the uh, US Navy were not at that point part of an official search. The ICAO, in its search and rescue, does ask any nation in the vicinity of where an aircraft might have crashed to undertake prompt action. I mean, suppose, for example, there was a successful ditching and there were survivors in life rafts, then it would have been paramount to get there as soon as possible and to help those survivors. You can divert ships that are in the Indian Ocean to the location, for example, or you can send out other search and rescue aircraft to spot life rafts or survivors. So, why were they there? I don't know, but I think they took it upon themselves. Perhaps initially they thought it was a hijack and they wanted to try and find out what happened to a hijacked aircraft with uh, 239 people on board. But they probably also wanted to see if there was something they could do to help. And yeah, it's a bit strange that they didn't file any flight plans, but that's quite common for military aircraft not to file flight plans. You can sometimes see military aircraft in the ADS-B data officially or the radar data, but not always. So it's a bit of a mystery, but we're going to come back to this subject on Sunday in that episode.
Right. And as we have already discussed in a previous episode, the US Defense Forces had access to this Inmarsat data virtually straight away. Correct?
Yeah, They, the satellites were built in the US by Lockheed Martin,
Mm.
and after the Air France crash in 2009, which was 5 years before MH370 disappeared, Inmarsat immediately started working with Lockheed Martin and Thales on how to use the BTO and BFO data should such a incident with a disappearing aircraft ever happen again. So they were well prepared when MH370 happened to, jump into action straight away.
Yeah. Now, and this is an important question. Um, I only have one small gripe. I'm sure you know that you are butchering Hannes Kosi's name. It is pronounced Coetzee. Now, can you talk to that, Richard? I'm sure, I mean, you talk to him all the time, so you should know.
Yeah, unfortunately, when I talk to Hannes, I just call him Hannes, so he
Yeah.
doesn't mind that. And I have to admit, Peeble Stuff 6178, I am not fluent in Afrikaans, but I understand Hannes Coetzee. I will try to pronounce it better in future.
There you go. Okay. Now, another question. Strange that term bathymetry has not been used.
Hmm. Well, I find that very strange. Aegean epiphany. Um, Bathymetric data, we have talked about in the very first episode on the 23rd of February, again on the 12th of March, on the 28th of March, most recently on the 2nd of April. And we have shown the bathymetric video from Geoscience Australia more times than I can count. So I'm not quite sure why you think we haven't used the term bathymetry.
Yeah, there you go. Skip Fisher. How many other factors support the Whisper site other than the drift analysis and Inmarsat? What book would you recommend for further reading? Concerning the last Whisper location that was determined by Jeffrey, I think it was actually by Richard, I'm curious what is done to resolve how far the plane could have gone following the detection. For instance, how low can Whisper detect a plane and how far could it have gone in the 2 minutes from the last position report derived from Whisper? Skip in Colorado.
Well, Skip, by the way, I've been to Colorado. It's a beautiful part of America.
Sure
Um,
is.
the Apart from the drift analysis and the Inmarsat satellite data, we have data from Boeing on how far and how long a Boeing 777 can stay in the air with the amount of fuel that it had on board and consideration of the weather at the time, the headwinds or tailwinds, and the temperature at altitude. So Boeing run simulations all the time, given the data. We also have data from Malaysian Airlines on the engineering data for the 9M MRO. Every aircraft carries a set of engineering data, maintenance data. So, for example, you know exactly the serial number of the engines from Rolls-Royce that were on the aircraft. You know the so-called performance degradation allowance for those engines because not every engine is pristine and new, and they become inefficient over time. So we have a lot of data from Boeing, which helps from Malaysian Airlines engineering, on top of the Inmarsat data and the drift analysis data, and now we have Whisper data. So there's a huge amount of data that you can put together. What book would you recommend reading? Well, there are 150 out there. and you can take your choice. I've read a number of them. I haven't bothered to read the ones about, well, it was taken by aliens, but there are some much more sensible books out there. And I would actually go as far as saying the definitive book on MH370 has not yet been published. So maybe you'd like to hold your breath on that one. As for your last question, Whisper can detect a plane right down to land or sea level, and it in detecting every 2 minutes, it just depends on the ground speed of the aircraft at that point. So, for example, if an aircraft has a ground speed of 500 knots, then it will travel 30 kilometers in 2 minutes. So that gives the limit to the accuracy of Whisper.
Okay. PG 3163 asks, just curious, is it for a fact that the data from Inmarsat is correct? And how did they verify it, I presume?
Yeah. Well, Inmarsat have long been in the business of both for aircraft and for ships of having satellite positioning and communication systems. In particular, they they took for the aircraft 9M MRO, which conducted the MH370 flight, they took previous flights and compared it to the Inmarsat data. And the ATSB, in their various reports, report on these test flights. And you can look that up and download the reports and follow that. So yes, the data is correct, and yes, it was verified by taking actual flights of this aircraft, previous flights, and comparing the Inmarsat data with the actual flight data from the aircraft.
Okay. Bogey Meister 886. Not sure if I pronounced that quite correctly. Why did acoustic sonar boys not pick up the plane crashing? And he adds, great show as always.
Well, thank you. I would pronounce it Bodgemeister, but
Yeah, I think you're right.
886.
Mm,
But but that's probably because I think the guy might be German because
yeah.
Meister is a, well, actually, it's not Meister. He writes Meester.
Mm.
Okay, well, we have to reserve judgment on 886. So, answer the question, acoustic sonar boys. Yeah, there are a whole bunch of acoustic, seismic, earthquake, tsunami. There's even a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty sensors, and they will pick up all kinds of acoustic signals underwater, whether they come from seabed mining or ice breaking up in the Antarctic or meteorites falling into the ocean. There's an excellent paper by a guy called Dr. Usama Kadri and his colleagues, which was published in the Nature magazine, and will include a link to nature.com articles and his paper. For example, there are between 18,000 and 84,000 meteorites bigger than 10 grams that fall to the Earth every year. Many of these are much bigger than 10 grams, and many of them fall in the ocean. And Dr. Usama Kadri, in his paper, believes he may have identified the source of a sound event uh, at the same time as MH370 crashed but was in fact a meteorite. And you can tell the different kinds of events have different acoustic signals, and he goes into that at great length.
Fascinating stuff. Now, I'm not going to even try and pronounce this next one. I'll just say it's 841. Anyone think Annette is one of Wise's puppies? Seriously, she should rename herself Nancy. Stop commenting when you don't know and cause more pain. What a trolling person. I changed that
Yeah.
last word. You
Yeah.
want to comment on that? Well,
Yeah. Annette Mansfield has various theories and various criticisms, not only of my work on Whisper or on drift models. She's actually criticized my work since 2018, first on Victor Yunello's website and later on other websites and Facebook pages like Veritas MH370. She also criticizes the ATSB, Inmarsat, the Seventh Arc, drift models, fuel models, and just about everyone else's work. So please don't attack Annette Mansfield, uh, but just, in my advice, ignore what she's saying.
yeah. So, Jumassi 7842. When Richard talks about Whisper being like tripwires that can be used to reconstruct the flight path, I struggle to understand his methodology. How does one know where along the tripwire the plane is, as I can't see anything in the Whisper data that would make it easy to determine this? Also, doesn't the path reconstruction presuppose an initial starting point? We know the plan was we know the plane was somewhere along the seventh arc, but don't know exactly where.
Yeah, and he signs off M7JZW, which is his call sign.
Yeah.
And actually, he yesterday contacted me and asked for all of my MATLAB software and data, which I sent to him. So he's now actively looking at that and following the Whisper tracking technology that I've developed. Answer to the question, how do you know where along the tripwire the plane is? Well, sometimes the tripwire is like a grid of tripwires. So when you tread on a tripwire, you can set off several tripwires in different directions, and they can work out where those various tripwires intersect, and that will point to you. So I have whisper anomalies, several of them intersecting at a particular point, and that will be quite precise in terms of determining a location. And another thing, since you're a radio engineer, you'll understand an ionospheric propagation spends most of its time several hundred kilometers above the Earth, and only when it's near the transmitter or the receiver or one of the interim landing points will it be in range of the altitude of an aircraft. So we can detect those, we know where those interim landing points are. And if that happens to coincide with the where we believe an aircraft is, that can also give us another clue in the Whisper study. And all of this is explained in 15 different papers. Perhaps easier to start with the most recent one on my website, and that will explain how this technology works.
And I'll abbreviate this one from Rustam Shah. He would like to know what would constitute an acceptable level of evidence to confirm the discovery of the wreckage of MH370.
Yeah, the Malaysian authorities have been quite clear. They want a substantial wreckage discovered, not just a little bit here or there, and they want verifiable uh, items. So items which have an identification plate or a particular design feature specific to a Boeing 777, or better still, specific to a Malaysian Airlines Boeing 777, or even better, if you get an identification plate with a serial number on it, which was on MRO aircraft. In the past, they've used, for example, stencil uh, or markings on certain parts to identify it, because Malaysian Airlines has a different stencil to Boeing in some cases. So, quite understandably, the Malaysians want substantial and verifiable evidence.
Final question, Richard, from Neil Clare. Maybe an odd question. Isn't there earthquake detection devices out in this ocean?
Indeed, there are several. Uh, Two hydroacoustic stations, HA01 at Cape Lewin in Western Australia and HA08 in Diego Garcia. There's an infrasound and radio nuclide stations, one again IS-52 in Diego Garcia and RN-64 in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And there is an auxiliary seismic station, AS-43, at Parapat in Indonesia. So all of these stations have interesting data to offer in the search for MH370.
Great. Well, we're kind of running out of time, viewers. So thank you very much for watching. We're going to take another break tomorrow, and we're going to be back on Sunday with an update on Martin Smith's sightings. And so we look forward to you tuning in on Sunday. Once again, Richard, thank you for all your research and work answering these questions. And viewers, thanks again for watching us. Please subscribe, please like us, and please keep those great questions coming. They're really terrific. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.